Namaskar. Welcome to this session of Straight Drive Panorama. I am Sudhanshu Mani. Viewers, there are innumerable basal and fundamental questions about ourselves. We Indians, history, legacy, ethos, religion, customs, philosophy, and so on. And there are layers and layers of information and misinformation, knowledge and ignorance, and understanding and lack of it. Typically, our questions are: how are we connected to ancient Indian civilization? What exactly is Indian culture? How and what to identify as unique or typical in ancient Indian philosophy, music, literature, and so on? And what does it tell us about our culture? Also, how did the advent of Islam or later the Britishers affect our society? As I had mentioned in the last session on this theme, ours is a blessed land which, apart from Hindu temples and Buddhist stupas, has one of the oldest mosques and churches in this land. I have been in dialogue on Straight Drive Panorama, in dialogue with Mr. Santosh Kumar, IFS, retired former ambassador, and a research analyst, thinker, and Hindi poet, with subject lines: Am I a Hindu? And who are we Indians? And in the same series, today, we will talk about what is Indian culture. Welcome, sir.
Namaste. Thank you.
Sir, straight away coming to you, Indian culture is a very misused term which we tend to employ loosely as per our own perception and sensibilities. And largely, I dare say, we do not have any in depth understanding of what this culture is. So let me begin with a request for you to delineate as to what you would portray or set forth as Indian culture.
Thank you, Sudhanshu. In its widest meaning, Indian culture can be said to be the way Indian people look at things, and this is manifested in their behavior patterns, their beliefs, their values, and the symbols that they recognize. More specifically, perhaps, we can say that the manifestations of culture which we can discuss today are things like religion, behavior patterns, language, um, then social. When I say behavior patterns, it also means social structures, then arts, music, and even cuisine. These are some of the more tangible manifestations of Indian culture.
Sir, so let's start, sir, from historically. The advent of agricultural societies provided stabilities and enabled knowledge, arts, and culture to develop. So we do know about Indian achievements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, metallurgy, and that Sanskrit language reached a high level of refinement in grammar, vocabulary, and literature. And so we have numerous ancient writers, poets, and those connected with literature. So, how did these aspects help in building up a refined culture?
Sudhanshu, let me first start by talking about the um, agricultural society and its relationship to culture, which you have mentioned in the beginning. As we all know, Homo sapiens or human beings originated from Africa and they spread all over the globe, firstly crossing into West Asia from Africa and then from there into Persia, what is now Iran, India, and beyond. And there were, as a result, maybe about 10,000 years ago, give or take a few thousand years, various civilizations developed along the river valleys. Now, why along the river valleys? This is precisely because at a certain stage of development, human beings discovered agriculture, and the river valleys were where water was available easily, where there was alluvial soil and the right conditions for agriculture. And so agriculture developed. Now, with the development of agriculture, what happened was that uh, in all parts of these river valleys, including in India, where I think the first manifestations of civilization were in the Indus Valley, and later on in the Ganga Valley, and of course, subsequently also in the river valleys of the south. Now, what happened was because of agriculture, one person could produce for many, and therefore it freed up a whole lot of population, and it gave them the wherewithal and the sustenance to be able to pursue the finer things of life, to pursue knowledge, to pursue the arts, and so on. Um, what also happened was that earlier there were hunter gatherers. Then society moved towards people who were rearing cattle, who were herdsmen. Both of these modes of economy were were modes where people were constantly on the move. With agriculture, you could have a settled civilization and therefore a certain amount of certainty, and therefore that added to how there was an enrichment of culture. So that is the broadly the relationship between agriculture and culture. Now, coming to your second question, if you can repeat what you said, what you asked about the developments or the achievements of culture in India, very briefly, then I will answer that question.
Sir, basically, what I asked is we loosely know about Indian achievements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, town planning, metallurgy, and so on, and that Sanskrit language reached a high level of refinement. So we want to know more about this and how did these aspects help in building up a so-called refined ancient Indian culture?
So, Danshu, I will again go back a little bit from what you have asked, because I think in the ancient times, there were two golden ages of culture in India. We mustn't forget the first one, which was the Indus Valley civilization, which flourished somewhere in between 3500 BC to about 2000 or 1900 BC, and which had very significant cultural achievements. One can only mention a few. One was, of course, town planning. They had towns which were regularly laid out in geometrical patterns with rectangular intersections of straight streets. The houses were built of durable material, and they had sanitation. They had drains which brought water and which took out sewage from each house. So here was a magnificent town planning concept, which existed what 5,000 years ago in India, in the Indus Valley, and also it covered not just the Indus Valley but about a million square kilometers, one of the largest civilizations of that time. You also have in that period other achievements in culture, things like textiles. If you look at the figurine of a what is called a priest king, you can see in it he's draped with a cloak with very intricate textile patterns on the textile, and that indicates that there was a high achievement in terms of textiles in the Indus Valley civilization. Similarly, there was high achievements in jewelry. You can see, for example, some remains of the jewelry where there are beads which are put in very attractive patterns, and you have found this jewelry all across countries far afield, away from, far from the Indus Valley civilization. So there was trade in this is jewelry and other things, of course, between the Indus Valley civilization and the rest of the civilized world. Similarly, you have handicrafts. You can look at, for example, a very famous figurine of a dancer. And from the figurine itself, you can experience that she's almost coming alive, the way she's standing there and with some, joyful spirit. And in that sculpture, in that figurine, is reflected a very high degree of handicraft and art. So that was the first high point, I think, in India in terms of culture. The second one, as you said, was a subsequent period, which probably you can say lasted 2000 years, from about 1500 BC to about maybe the 9th century AD, in which there were, of course, many ups and downs, but you had a whole lot of achievements. You have mentioned science, technology, mathematics, and I would say that this is a subject which we can deal with in detail later in another episode, but everyone knows that the mathematical and astronomical discoveries and researches of Aryabhat and others are things which we can be proud of. Aryabhat also, and also apart from that, there are medical achievements. Everyone has heard of Charaka and Sushruta, who achieved a high degree of excellence in the study of botanical medicines, in surgery, and in the treatment of various diseases. Then I think we can leave this in detail for some other time, and so also can we leave music, because music is another thing which started with the Vedas, and where there was chanting, there was rhythms and cadences, and that is something from which flowed the music subsequently, which has resulted in the rich heritage of music that we have now. I mean, there is you can trace that connection, but again, there's something we can talk of later.
Sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So right now, I would only want to talk about literature and language. Language-wise, there was an excellence achieved in grammar. The names of Panini, Patanjali are well known in that area. Then there were great achievements in literature, which started actually with the Vedas. The Vedas, apart from being a religious text, are very inspiring literature. And that is combined with the beginnings of a very high philosophy, metaphysical and spiritual philosophy. But there are very lyrical pieces in the Vedas about the forces of nature, which are not necessarily only of religious content or spiritual content. They are beautiful in themselves. Then you had, I would like to quote from one of the verses of the Vedas from the Nasadiya Sukta, which gives an idea of the high degree of philosophy and skepticism that was present even as early as when the Vedas were first composed. And this is only, I am giving you an English translation of one verse, which says, "Whence has this creation come? Who holds or does not hold? He who is its surveyor in the highest heaven, he alone knoweth, and yet doth he know?" So there's that element of doubt, of skepticism, which is the hallmark of an inquiring mind, which is a heritage which comes down to us from those ancient times. Subsequently, in the classical uh, period of Sanskrit, you have great literary achievements, starting with Kalidas. Then you have Banabhatta, you have Ashwaghosh, you have Bhavabhuti, and of course in Tamil you have Kamban, and there are a host of others. And this is something where this is an age in which literature really flowered, both in terms of poetry and in terms of drama. So I would call this the second golden age, the first one being the Indus Valley civilization.
Thank you, sir. So, summarizing this belief that our Indian culture was actually golden in ancient times and also more recent times. Of course, you have talked about the greatness of the Indus Valley civilization and also the philosophical quest during the time of the Vedas and later also in the middle of the first millennium AD, that were periods which could be called as golden age of Indian culture. I'll come to a related question, sir. So we had these golden periods, so to say, of high culture accomplishments in ancient times. So then what do you think? Was it destroyed or mutilated or harmed in some way by Muslim invaders and later the British colonialists? Or looking at different aspects of the issue, is it a case of strengthening of what we had, evolving into something more composite and inclusive?
The cultural influx which happened with the Muslims coming in and then later the British is a history which is complicated. And we have to look at it in terms of those complications. If we start with the Muslim invaders, as you call them, they came, the fighters were basically unlettered, but they brought along with them some scholars and artists who were well steeped in the culture of West Asia, that is Persian culture and Turkic culture. And soon these two streams, that is the cultural stream which came from outside and the already well-established and highly the high standard culture, which was indigenous to India at that time, both of these merged and they interacted with each other. They then produced an efflorescence, which I think enriched culture. And we can look at some of the examples of this. For example, if you look at architecture, there was, of course, a well-developed system of architecture earlier, which is visible in the temples, which are present mostly now in South India. But with the advent of the Islamic rule in India, new concepts of architecture came into the Indian Architectural Dictionary. These included things like arches. They included things like domes. You have great examples of that in, for example, the Jama Masjid in Delhi. And one of my favorites is the Lodi tombs. Minarets, again, a new concept which has been included in Indian architecture, and which is most famously noted in the Taj Mahal, which is one of the seven wonders of the world. You have again music, which we will discuss in another episode. Paintings. There was, with the advent of the Muslim invaders, came miniature painting. We had, of course, great achievements in painting earlier, which are represented by the Ajanta caves and other mural paintings. But this concept of miniature paintings and with exquisite detail in them was a product of that time. Similarly, in terms of religion, of course, with the coming of Muslim rule, there was certain state sponsorship to Islam, and that led to various excesses. But at the same time, there was the Sufi movement, which spread through India and which really combined a lot of Hindu concepts with Islam's ideals of equality, and that combined with Indian religious symbolisms and with mysticism of Hindu religion became a very popular movement in India, and that then produced also or rather went hand in hand with the Bhakti cult, which became prevalent in India in those times. Then another great synthesis took place in cuisine. So these Turkish and Persian modes of cuisine then combined with what there was in India and produced the world-renowned Indian cuisine of today. Then one more thing is dress. The dresses that we have today, even till today, bear the stamp of the influences from Persia. The miniature paintings, which I had earlier had occasion to point out, bring this out. Those dresses, you can see that some of them could very well be what you and I could be dressed in for a cultural occasion, even this day. So these are some of the influences which are manifest from that time. Now coming to the British time, let us be in no two opinions about it. The British established very exploitative political and economic system here, which led to many excesses, and it also created a whole lot of vicissitudes in Indian culture, and of course a domination of Indian culture in some ways by European and British modes of thinking and culture and language. So having said that, there are various things which we must recognize which are a positive from the British rule. Not that we would wish to have the British rule back, but when you look at that period, there are certain things which stand out as things which are helping India of today. The first one, of course, is that because of that very colonial rule that they had imposed, the concept of a unity of India, because they had succeeded in uniting the most of the territory of what we have in India today, and even more, into one political unit. And this was the first time, perhaps, after the Mughals, that such a unit had came into being. So this idea of the political unity of India and the idea of nationalism as a reaction to the to colonial rule, these are things which happened. And thirdly, of course, in the political realm, their introduction of partial democracy helped in developing the sense of democracy that we have today. But even apart from that, the British, for their own purposes, of course, studied and systematized Sanskrit works, which had been till then confined to a few people, learned people who kept it to themselves. These were not now systematized and available to the general public. Education was also now brought out from its confines and became available to the general public. And these things helped in the development of culture and are still helping even today. Then we have things like how they studied languages and scripts. Much of the knowledge that we have about today, about scripts, for example, the Brahmi script, in which Ashoka wrote his great edicts, it was unknown. The edicts were known and the language was not deciphered. And it was during British times that scholars were in India, British scholars, first started working on this, and they deciphered the script, which opened up a huge new insight into ancient culture for Indians. Archaeology, systematic digs in which various archaeological remains, including the Indus Valley sites and others, were a product of the Archaeological Survey of India. Similarly, systematic surveys of anthropological, botanical, and geological features of India started at that time. History. We had various historical accounts earlier, but these were mainly accounts written by courtier historians, and therefore they were written to glorify the rulers. And perhaps that was, the scientific approach in that was not complete. So, a sort of remolding of historical study to make it more scientific, social reforms. These are all things in which the British made contributions, this maybe for their own interest, some of it, but we have also been able to derive some benefit from these developments.
Sir, sir, we need sessions and sessions to, discuss the features of our great country and, of course, take the benefit of your wealth of knowledge on the subject. But today we have a time constraint, so I'll have only two more questions and expect very brief answers. One is the evolution of Indian culture. If we take it region-wise, say in the north and south of the country, so of course there are significant differences we must celebrate, although their similarity does bind us together. So how do you see that?
You're absolutely right. There are differences between East and West, North and South. But there are common underlying factors which are common to all of us and which define us as Indians. I'll only briefly mention a few of them. The first one, of course, is language, where even in the ancient language, that is Sanskrit, and in the South Indian languages, there has been an interchange of words and sounds. So it is not that they developed totally in different compartments. Similarly, the script, we think of today's script of different languages as different, but they all originated from one source, which was the Brahmi script. And you can see the evolution of that Brahmi script in different regions, in different directions because of local materials and so on. But there is a common origin of almost all our scripts. Similarly, music. Many of the ragas are common to North and South. And perhaps we owe a debt to the Southern music, the Carnatic music, in preserving some of the older forms, which were in the North. They were not so distinctly preserved as in the South. Religion, as I had occasion to say in one of the earlier talks, Hinduism binds a large percentage of our public, irrespective of whether they live in the north or south, east or west. Then you have, of course, things which bind us, which are in the field of economics and trade, but I will not really go into that over here because we are talking of culture.
Sir, now, sir, in the end, a little controversial subject. In recent years, there has been an attempt to invent non-existent features of our culture and knowledge, which are nothing but seemingly very make-believe stories meant to instill some pride among our countrymen. But if our culture has been a wellspring of great thoughts and knowledge, it is good enough for all of us to be naturally proud of it. So where is the need to do this? So how do you see this?
Sudhanshu, I will mention 2 or 3 points in this connection. The first one, of course, is something which I had referred to earlier, which is that there have been contributions to Indian culture throughout the ages. And so we can liken Indian culture to a mighty stream where there have been many tributaries which have joined the mainstream and they have made the river bigger and broader and richer. And to that extent, if we recognize this, if we know our history, we will recognize this, I'm sure. All of us, whether you are Hindu or Muslim, whether you're Tamilian or Punjabi, Bengali or Marathi, all of us are participants in this culture. So all of that culture is something which all of us can be proud of. That's the first point I want to make. The second one I want to make is that we must take that pride with a historical context. The historical context is that if you look at the high periods or high points in our culture, they were followed by a hiatus, a time of decline. For example, after the Indus Valley civilization fell apart, you can see some decline in things like town planning, in concepts of sanitation, in context of house building, in the context of pottery, and um, various other aspects which we know about had high achievements in the Indus Valley civilization period. Similarly, after the golden age of which lasted, let's say, roughly till the 9th century AD, you have again a period where perhaps, we talk about how the culture was impacted by foreign invasions. That is part of the story. But the other part, which is not so well recognized, is that perhaps our systems had fallen into some brittleness and decline even earlier, and that contributed to the success of those invasions. This, the breakup of the modern empire, the warring states in between. You can look at the religious concepts where the high point which was reached in the Upanishads, and the high point which was reached in Shankaracharya's philosophy soon gave way to more ritual worship and bhakti and so on. So the intellectual content of the religion really came down. Then there are other areas where you can say that weaknesses had developed. Knowledge systems, people tended to rely more on what had been achieved, and new knowledge was produced much less. So these are all signs of a brittleness in the system which came about. So the hiatuses after these two golden periods should make us think of the reasons why this decline took place, so that, in future, we should not repeat the same mistakes.
Yes, sir.
And the last point which I want to make there is that when we appraise the past, when we appraise the history of those golden periods, and even of the periods where some people may think, negative events took place or there was a decline, we have to have a proper evaluation of those periods of high achievement. As you said, there are enough high achievements in those times for us not to manufacture new ones. So we must not dwell on the negatives. The way forward is not to dwell on the negatives, but to build on the positives. And to repeat again, we have enough achievements. We don't need to manufacture new ones.
Yes, sir. So on that note, thank you very much, sir, for appearing in this platform. And we will sure be honored to have you again and talk about some other great aspect of our country. Viewers, I hope you found the session today interesting. This is it for today. We will be back next Thursday on Straight Drive once again. Namaskar.
Namaskar.